Welcome to Porter-Pedia, the show where we unlock the world of Cole Porter.
Great to be here.
So today we're doing a deep dive that might actually surprise you quite a bit. We're going to explore some really unexpected connections.
Yeah, we're talking about the sophisticated world of Cole Porter and comparing it to the, vibrant, often pretty provocative realm of hip-hop culture.
It sounds like worlds apart, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But our source suggests they actually share quite a lot of common ground. It's fascinating.
It really is. I mean, you think Cole Porter, elegant melodies, super witty, sophisticated lyrics, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Champagne and ballrooms.
Right. And then hip-hop, maybe street narratives, raw energy, heavy beats come to mind. But the source, it points out these shared sensibilities.
Like what specifically?
Well, things like intricate rhyming schemes, for one. Clever use of double meanings, big time for both. Using lists to build narratives.
Social commentary.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, and a fascination with cultural icons. And maybe the most striking, both seemed almost determined to attract the censors. Willfully, you could say.
That really is the core of our mission today, isn't it? It sort of forces us to ask, how has popular music, across completely different times, always pushed the boundaries, pushed against what's considered good taste or societal norms?
Exactly. And what does that tell us about how we judge music or art in general today? It's about that constant tension, really, between what gets labeled high art and what gets dismissed as, low culture.
Our source makes a really powerful point here. It says, looking at what was considered indecent, whether it's Porter back then or a rapper now, can be a real teachable moment.
Absolutely. Drawing these lines, these comparisons, it opens up a vital conversation, doesn't it, about how social contexts change and how music, whatever the genre, keeps challenging things.
Okay, so before we really unpack those connections between Porter and hip-hop, maybe we should clarify what we mean by hip-hop culture, because it's more than just the music itself.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, when our source talks about hip-hop, it means that whole sort of cultural expression that came out of the Bronx back in the 70s, urban youth culture.
So rap music, the rhyming over beats, is part of it.
Right, but it also includes DJing, sampling, breakdancing, even graffiti art. It was all very grassroots, these expressions from primarily urban African-American youth.
And one scholar, Venice Berry, apparently points out that hip-hop culture really mirrors urban life. That aggressiveness you sometimes hear, it's seen as reflecting the anger, the frustrations of that existence.
Yeah, it started as these, community parties, very participatory. And then later, of course, it got more commercialized, moved into recording studios and all that.
It's interesting, though, how much resistance hip-hop, especially rap, often faces in education. Our source notes that even though it's hugely popular, crosses all sorts of lines, socioeconomic, ethnic, and is definitely mainstream. Schools often see it as problematic.
Right. It highlights that tension again, doesn't it, between maybe what teachers value musically and what students are actually listening to, what connects with them. It becomes a real point of conflict sometimes.
So let's talk about this idea of high art versus low culture, historically.
Okay. Well, Western art music, classical music, its status as high culture is often built on this idea that it somehow transcends the body. It's seen as above the perceived sexuality of popular music.
But is that really true?
Well, as scholars, McClary and Walser put it quite simply, the music plays, the body moves. I mean, think about the waltz back in the 18th century.
Right.
Today, it seems incredibly tame musically, but the simple fact that couples touched while dancing, that was seen as totally scandalous by polite society back then.
That's a fantastic point.
Yeah.
So popular music has always kind of pushed boundaries, but rap often gets singled out, doesn't it? With lyrics that can be sexually explicit, sometimes misogynistic, profanity, violence.
Yeah, it seems to push maybe even further, or at least differently, and it often gets blamed for societal problems, leads to calls for censorship from, all over the place. It's a familiar pattern, really, just a different soundtrack this time.
But is it truly pushing further? Or is that maybe our modern viewpoint, our own bias making it seem that way?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And this is where looking at Porter and hip-hop together gets really illuminating, especially if you look at it through a literacy lens, like our source suggests.
How so?
Well, the argument is if you focus on rap's really intricate rhyme schemes, and they often are very intricate, you can easily connect it back to poetry, to lyric writing in general, and that opens the door to talking about the social commentary within it.
Okay, let's dive into Cole Porter's lyrics then, because he was absolutely a master of words. He loved wordplay, used really interesting, often quite unconventional rhymes,
Definitely.
and he was famous for those witty lists, right? Like
Yeah.
in You're the Top or Anything Goes.
Classic examples.
And he absolutely packed his songs with social commentary, clever double meanings, and he was constantly pushing the limits of what was considered good taste back then.
Oh, for sure. Take Let's Do It, Let's Fall in Love. Our source points out the original lyrics weren't just full of sexual suggestion and double meanings.
Which they definitely were.
Right, but they also apparently contain some overtly racist slang that was common then, but is, obviously deeply offensive to us now.
Wow. That really underscores how norms shift, how our sensitivities change over generations.
It does, and there's this striking anecdote in our source. Someone played an explicit contemporary rap track to urban high school students. They knew it, weren't fazed by the language at all, complete recognition.
Okay.
But then they played an early recording of Porter's Let's Do It, not the cleaned up Ella Fitzgerald version most people know.
Right, the original.
Yeah. And the students visibly winced. They were uncomfortable. And it sparked this amazing discussion about what actually offends different generations. It's not always what you'd predict.
That's fascinating. And it makes sense when you think about Porter's own life, right? He was wealthy, an expatriate in Europe after World War I, hanging out with artists, musicians.
Right, a very bohemian crowd.
It gave him this kind of jaded, sophisticated perspective on life, love, high society.
Mm-hmm.
And that clearly fed into his songwriting. The humor often came from contrasting high and low culture, refinement, and vulgarity. And yeah, he definitely provoked the censors.
And it's interesting because around the same time, maybe a bit later, across the ocean in Trinidad and Tobago, you have calypso music really taking off.
Calypso.
Yeah. And it was this powerful way for the West Indian working class to mock the ruling class, expose hypocrisy using humor and satire. The wordplay, the social commentary, the sexual innuendo in calypso. It's incredibly similar to Porter's style in many ways.
And I bet calypso faced censorship too.
Oh, frequently.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The lyrics often push boundaries just as much.
So you got these clear stylistic links, Porter and calypso, musically, textually, but the source goes deeper, right? It connects calypso back to African oral traditions.
Exactly. Many of the techniques used by calypso singers, the verbal sparring, the lyrical devices, you can see direct parallels in the techniques used by rappers today. It's highlighted that African societies have often linked struggles for freedom with musical celebration.
And that underlying context, dissatisfaction, alienation forms the basis for lyrics in both calypso and rap. It's like a continuous line evolving over time.
Precisely. It just beautifully shows that while Porter's music might feel culturally worlds away from calypso and rap now, they share this really profound common ground. Themes of sex, drugs, alcohol, money, lifestyle excess, social critique, politics, often wrapped in double meanings. They've been around forever in so-called high art and low art.
So rap music definitely doesn't have a monopoly on challenging the establishment or pushing those boundaries.
Not at all.
You know, it's funny, this whole idea of music being dangerous or needing censorship isn't new either.
Yeah.
Our source takes us way back, like all the way back to Plato.
Plato.
Yeah. Apparently he condemned certain musical scales because they were too sensual. He worried complex rhythms would lead to, like, depression and disorder in society. He even suggested banning them.
Wow. Okay.
And then there's the whole devil's chord thing, the tritone, right? Famously used in Saint-Saëns' Danse Macabre. Sounds like a familiar kind of panic, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. I mean, Calvin warned people about musical chaos and voluptuousness. Descartes apparently feared music because it could excite the imagination too much. So yeah, rappers, calypsonians, Cole Porter, they're actually in pretty esteemed company when it comes to provoking strong reactions.
Good point.
Think about composers we consider pillars of high art. Mozart's Marriage of Figaro, that was sharp social critique for its time, class commentary.
Right.
Verdi's operas were often explicitly designed to stir political feelings. Benjamin Britten's War Requiem is a powerful anti-war statement. And think of all the sexual conflicts in countless operas. The art form has always grappled with this stuff.
And sometimes, even music without lyrics caused outrage. Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, 1913. People literally rioted at the Paris premiere.
That's right.
Not because of words, but the rhythm. The excessive emphasis on rhythm, the hints of primal culture, that was enough to cause a massive uproar.
And later, Shostakovich. His opera, Lady Macbeth of Mtsensk, was praised at first, then denounced by Pravda as primitive and vulgar. So even within supposed high culture, audiences weren't shielded from music's, subversive side, its sensuality or explicit content.
Which brings us to that objection you sometimes hear. Rap is not music. Our source mentions this comes up a lot.
Yeah, apparently not just at academic conferences, but even like dinner parties among parents who just hear it as noise.
Right.
Scholar Robert Walser makes the point that music is often missing from discussions about rap, partly because many people just don't even hear it as music to begin with.
And what's really wild, according to Walser, is that sometimes even classical and popular musicians kind of agree on this.
What are the usual arguments?
Well, the assumptions are often that real music needs melody and harmony, it needs years of learning an instrument or singing, and it has to be original.
Mm-hmm.
So the argument goes, rap isn't melodic, it lacks musical skill, it just samples other stuff, and rappers don't sing or play instruments.
Right. But those arguments kind of crumble when you actually look at music history, don't they? Take the sampling issue, the lack of original material.
Yeah.
Our source brings up this brilliant comparison, the musical quodli-bet, basically what hip-hop calls sampling. Classical composers were doing centuries ago.
Okay, explain quodli-bet.
It was basically a technique popular around the 16th century where you'd skillfully weave together two or more existing melodies into a new piece, often for humorous effect or parody. It was like an early form of musical collage, really.
That's an amazing parallel. So Bach did this.
Yep. In the last variation of his Goldberg Variations, he quotes two folk tunes simultaneously, woven in with his main theme. It's quite clever.
And there are modern examples too.
Oh, yeah. The source mentions Outkast quoting Bach's double violin concerto in one of their tracks, and Coolio directly sampling Pachelbel's canon in I'll See You When You Get There. It's a direct lineage of borrowing, recontextualizing.
And there was even a poetic quodli-bet that used lists.
Exactly. Sometimes it involved a catalog technique, just listing items loosely connected by a theme, which is a clear literary forerunner to the list songs of Porter, Calypso artists, and yes, rappers.
Okay, what about the argument that rappers don't sing?
Well, think about opera. It uses recitative, right? That style that's more like heightened speech, moves the plot along.
Sure.
Or the German Sprechstimme, literally speak singing. These are established techniques that blur the lines between speaking and singing, very much like how a rapper delivers lyrics over a beat.
And the not playing instruments argument.
Again, look at contemporary art music. So much of it relies heavily on sampling manipulated sounds. Steve Reich's Different Trains, for example, uses looped voices, sound effects alongside instruments. Or compositions made entirely from tape loops, natural sounds. It challenges the whole notion.
So it becomes almost inconsistent, doesn't it? To say rap isn't music because it lacks traditional melody or harmony, when huge chunks of respected contemporary art music don't fit those molds either.
Exactly. If you were at the premiere of some of those works back in the day, you might well have scratched your head and asked, is this music?
It really shows how what's considered popular or even good can just shift so dramatically from one generation to the next. This whole deep dive really highlights how many connections, musical and otherwise, you can draw across huge spans of time and genre.
Yeah, and our source suggests that if educators, for instance, make an effort to meet students where they are, to bridge that gap between musical worlds, it can create this incredibly rich learning environment for everyone. Reciprocal learning.
I totally agree. That automatic dismissal, students dismissing classical music, adults dismissing rap, it often comes from the same place, right? Yeah. Discomfort with the unknown, the unfamiliar.
It could be students posturing to seem cool or adults taking an authoritative stance. But if we actually try to connect, try to explore, we all stand to learn a massive amount from each other.
So we've seen today how Cole Porter and hip-hop, separated by generations, different social worlds, but they share this surprising amount of common artistic ground and this shared power to provoke.
Absolutely. It's clear that music's ability to challenge, to entertain, and crucially to reflect society's changing norms, that's a constant thread throughout history. It's powerful.
Okay, so here's something for you to think about after this deep dive. What music being made today, music that maybe some people dismiss as low culture or just noise, what music might future generations look back on and celebrate as profound, maybe even as high art?
That's a great question.
And what does considering that possibility tell you about your own biases, maybe unconscious ones, about what counts as good taste in music right now?
Lots to think about there.
We hope this exploration has given you a fresh perspective on just how enduring music's power is, its power to reflect us, and yes, to provoke us.